you brought up mentorship. And of course, that's one of the reasons I wanted to have you here, to come and talk with our newsroom, which is also trying to embody newsroom change, make sure that we are able to create a newsroom that looks more like America. And I think that, for me personally, a big piece of that, as I've been here for the last couple of years, is around creating a culture of mentorship, right? And so it's something that Emma Bowen has done for years. I wanted to ask you, though, one of the things that comes up, and I think they're good questions, but it's around the idea that mentorship now isn't only about training, it's also about creating access to the decision makers, right? So white men, very lucky. We know statistically, this is not just something I'm saying, based on, accepted studies, have more natural, organic opportunities to interact with decision makers, which directly impacts their advancement. So when I think about mentorship for our newsroom, I'm thinking about not only having somebody who can train and be a shoulder, but also create direct access. But here's where it gets tricky, and this is where I want to get your input. Because of that, was also a study that makes me feel so uncomfortable to talk about, but I'm a journalist, so I will. It talks about the premiumness of the white male mentor. So that is to say that when I'm taking my early career, journalists and matching them up, on one hand, I am thinking who gets them closest to the decision makers. But on the flip side, am I reinforcing structural racism by saying that they're going to have to chat, So tell me, what do you say to this? How do we handle this?
I actually don't think it's a matter of either or. I think it's both. I think it's and. And I think that young people of color need both the white men that created the game, that have done well. There's the idea of privilege, which comes with they can just walk into spaces and feel like they belong. They're not waiting for someone to give them permission, whether it be permission to enter or permission to speak. And I think for so long, we do the opposite. We put our head down, we do good work, and we just hope someone will see us and promote us and take us with them. I have been a fan. When I write my book, I have a chapter, FWGs. So I don't know if I'm reinforcing this either, my favorite white guys, because I was clear young in my career that women of color have leaned in heavily with me. So that's half of it. But I also needed that white male mentor or sponsor. Mentor is we already have a relationship. You know me, you know my desires, you know my wishes, and you want to help me achieve them all. Sponsorship means that you have access to rooms and people and places that I don't, and that I might never if not for you carrying my name with you. So to your point, until we demystify how this happened years and years and centuries ago, why it is this way, it is what it is. So then how do we get in quickly? Because we don't have a whole lot of time to rise through the ranks and to do so effectively, which means lifting as you climb. But you have to know the game. You have to have the tools to win at the game. Oftentimes that comes from having a white male mentor and or sponsor or advocate so that they can actually tell you, don't do that. And here's why you don't want to do that. Those conversations happen organically. And it typically is because someone sees you. The magnifying glass is out in ways you don't even know, that someone's watching your every move. They're studying you, and they're deciding, do you have the potential? Do you have what it takes to get to the top? Because it's one thing to get in the room. It's another to stay in the room. It's the relationships, the trust is what keeps us in the room. And oftentimes it means having to operate from a place of being vulnerable. And we've not all been taught how to be vulnerable. It goes back to you get in the room, you do good work, you put your head down, someone will see you. No, if we want to stack the deck in our favor, we have to be vulnerable. We have to be willing to trust, which means we have to put ourselves out there. So I'd like to think that narrative will shift, because the more white men that pull men of color women of color with them, you're diversifying rooms that would not have previously been diverse. Now, the onus is on us to keep that door open and to bring in the next generation and the next generation so that everyone starts to buy into the lifting as we climb. So I think I think you need both. I've benefited from both. I need to be able to talk to someone who looks like me, who can understand that my challenges are going to be very different than that of white women, but that's not to discount their ability to teach me or to help me get over hurdles. And so I have found in my career that I've benefited from all of the above, but I also know that I put myself out there so that I could be molded, so that I could be the sponge soaking it up. And I try to tell this next generation to be thoughtful about there's who you think sees you, and then there's who sees you. And you have to be intentional on both sides. Mentors, sponsors, advocates, folks like us who are already in the room. We do have to be mindful of who else is sitting to the right and to the left of me. And if there's not enough of us, how do we leverage those relationships that if we didn't take the time to push-pull, if we didn't take the time to show up worthy, and not because someone else told us that we were worthy, but because we know we're worthy, so that when we get into the room, we know and have all the skills to stay in the room. So I absolutely think I've benefited from both. I think about my colleagues who are doing well for themselves, who've moved up the ranks. It's because they opened themselves up to be the recipient of different advisors, regardless as to the shape or to the color or to the gender, for that matter. I think more is more. You want to walk into a room and have people want to lean in. That's what we're teaching our fellows. That's what our alums know. And our alums are the gifts that keep on giving. When they can tell their story in an authentic way, in a textured way, I think it does a version of surprise and delights the next generation. But you have to first see your face in high places to know that it's possible. If you don't, it's not that you can't, but you may not have the blueprint in front of you to help you navigate. And Lord knows we have enough to navigate. And then on top of that, I'm suggesting that you find your comfort in being uncomfortable. It's a lot of work to be done, but it's worth it. It's worth it. But I think the first question is, do you want it? And are you willing to go through what it's going to take to get there? And I'm learning more and more every day that what got me here is not what's going to get me there by way of my next step, which means I'm going to have to talk to people who are in spaces and places that even I'm not in, even at this level of my career. So as long as you're open to the learning and you're open to who's leaning in and leaving their thumbprint on you, I think the more open you are to the universe sending you what you need, but you have to first know what it is. And in some cases, you may not, which means you need to ask more questions than you may actually have answers, and that you want your well to be deep and full with a little bit of everything, because people have a lot to teach. I think sometimes we go about things in a vacuum and we're not always open to hearing constructive feedback. Doesn't mean we have to agree with it, but we need to show up as being open to it. And those are the moving pieces: emotional intelligence, conflict resolution, effective communication, how to receive feedback that you may not like or agree with. There's a gracious way to do it all so that you stay in the game and that the people around you know you're invested. But we have to teach them what that looks like in order for them to get there. I don't think we'll get there by osmosis.
Yeah.